Hi, thank you for joining. My name is David Ortiz. I'm a registered investment advisor with Trajan Wealth. You tuned in to find out what the difference is between your discounted internet $495 trust and the properly executed trust. First of all, let me start by saying that many of these trusts at that price do work. I've seen trusts cost anywhere from $500 to as much as $30,000. There is definitely a difference between those documents, and on top of that, there's also a difference in how they work. So I will be happy to go over all those differences with you, so stay with me and we'll get started. First of all, when you go to see an attorney, they usually take notes and prepare your document accordingly, but when you're dealing with somebody remotely, then they give you some type of organizer or worksheet to be able to do that with. So your typical discounted trust will have an organizer or worksheet, which is very similar to this. This one here happens to be roughly 8 pages, asking basic information: who you are, who are your kids, what do you own, who's going to get your stuff, who's going to be in charge, your executor, successor, trustee. Now, this particular document is also a worksheet. It's double-sided. It's 37 pages. It asks different things like who were you previously married to? Do you have children from prior marriages? Who's going to get your separate property? Who's going to get your community property? Is there people that need special services in the event of your death, like somebody who's disabled or a minor child? Do you need guardians? These are questions that you'll get asked in something like this as opposed to something like this. One of the other things that you'll find is that there's also different orders of managerial authority, as in powers of attorney. There's medical, there's financial, there's different lists of assets, separate property, community property. Of course, in a married couple, there's could be his, hers, and our separate property. So we want to make sure that we're very thorough. There's also other possible contingencies, like people who are addicted to drugs or alcohol, where you, as the owner of the estate, may want to have a little more control on how those assets are distributed to those people. So these are different things that you may want to consider, where you may not even be asked that question. Those types of questions are asked in something like this. So that being said, when all the documents are completed, this is your discounted trust, and this is a more thorough, complete trust that covers all possible contingencies, depending on who dies first, when, beneficiaries, asset distribution. Far more thorough than your discounted trust. The idea is that we want to make sure that all I's are crossed, all I's are dotted, and all T's are crossed, because after you're gone, there's no way to fix it. The whole purpose of you getting the trust is to manage your estate or distribute your estate after you and your spouse, or just you, are deceased, and you don't want it to go through the probate court. First of all, the reason we have a probate court is when people die in what's called intestate, the survivors have no ability to liquidate the assets of other people. You don't have that ability while you're living. You certainly don't have it when someone is deceased. So the probate court has to grant that to you. They do that via a will, if you have one. If not, they use what's called the laws of intestacy, which simply follow bloodlines. The other way to avoid or get your assets to your heirs, but avoid that costly, time-consuming probate process, which would cost several $1,000s or into the tens of thousands of dollars to administer, and could take several years. I believe Marilyn Monroe's estate took nearly 30 years to finally settle. And by the time it was all said and done, everybody made money. If you're an attorney, if you were an heir, you got nothing. So we want to make sure all that's covered. So when we take a look at the difference of the documents, obviously there's a big difference. Why is this trust like this and this trust like this? There are some things that are missing. Well, let's just start with, first of all, your trust, for it to work, has to be properly executed. To execute a living trust, it has to be notarized. Now, most of the documents that you get on the internet are emailed to you, and subsequently you have to print them and then find a notary. Well, a trust about this big, you're going to have about 15 to 20 signatures. A notary charges $10 a signature, so that's about $150, $200. If the notary comes out to you, then they charge a travel fee. That could cost, who knows? You may be spending another $200 to $300, $400 just to get the thing signed, and it's not even funded yet. Whereas this trust, a notary who's experienced in notarizing this particular trust will come out, and that is included. Now, both of these trusts do have the most fundamental of documents, and let's just take a look at this particular trust. This particular trust has a very colorful table of contents. You got 8 special documents, and we're looking at your revocable living trust, which I said was the most fundamental of documents. It includes asset schedules, community property agreement, wills, powers of attorney, and so on. But there is something missing. We'll get to that a little bit later. Now, this particular trust, which has all the same documents, far more thorough, obviously, because we have not just a schedule of assets for community property, but also separate property. So you have far more comprehensive documents, separate distributions, and of course there are a few things that are missing. So notarization's included, everything you'll need is included, as opposed to having missing documents which you may not even realize. So the revocable living trust, once you create it, you have to fund it. I'll discuss funding later, but funding is far more important than actually executing the trust, only because if the trust isn't funded, then it's not going to work regardless of whether it was $500 or $30,000 that you spent. So executing it is the first step, funding it is the primary step. So now we get over to your other documents or supporting documents that you have. One of the ones that you have is what's called a community property agreement, which is available for married couples. And what that does, it eliminates the capital gains tax on assets that would have a capital gain at the death of the first spouse. The cost basis gets stepped up to the fair market value. So therefore, you eliminate the capital gains tax. Most of those internet trusts don't even include that community property agreement. This trust, which is about $700 or $800, does include that. So fortunately, you do get that and a binder and some paper. Again, the discounted trust on the internet, they email you the forms, you have to print them, you have to find a notary, and hopefully that notary knows what they're doing. Now, in addition to that, you have to have a will. I explained funding. You avoid probate if you have a properly executed living trust and your assets are funded into it. If the assets aren't funded into it, then it goes through probate. Like I explained earlier, what does probate use to administer the estate? They use a will. So you have a pour-over will for any unfunded assets, whether it be one or all. They go through probate, through your will, and then into your trust to your beneficiaries. So most estate plans will include that that pour-over will. In addition to that, you have different classes of assets. You have non-qualified assets, real estate, bank accounts, stock accounts, and so on. Those get funded into your trust. Qualified plans, which would include 401ks, 457s, deferred compensation, pensions, IRAs, life insurance, Roth IRAs. All these plans have named beneficiaries and avoid probate as long as you have a named beneficiary. They also get some type of tax benefit, as in life insurance is tax-free to the beneficiaries. IRAs have a tax contribution that's tax deductible, as well as the interest that grows is tax deferred until you take that money out. So those can't be funded into the trust in the traditional method as the non-qualified assets. So you need to know somebody who knows what they're doing when it comes to asset identification, because if you put the asset in the trust and it shouldn't have been, now you've got a huge tax problem. So you want to make sure you talk to someone who's experienced in assisting you in the funding process. So the next document that I'm going to be discussing is the financial power of attorney. Because the qualified assets don't actually get transferred to your trust, how do they get managed in the event of your incapacity? Well, that's what the financial durable power of attorney is for. The asset will avoid probate by getting paid to the beneficiaries, and it will be managed through the financial durable power of attorney. In addition to that, we also have a medical power of attorney to manage your health care in the event of your incapacity. So if you can't make your own medical decisions, someone needs to make them for you. Now keep in mind, whether it be the trust, the will, or powers of attorney, you, on that worksheet, get to appoint the person that you want to make those decisions for you. And you can appoint alternate people in case that person's deceased, moved out of state, no longer available, doesn't want to do it, can't do it. So you have more choices on who's going to be the person in charge in the event of your incapacity or death. So also in the medical directive, in addition to your healthcare power of attorney or conservator, you also have your end-of-life decisions. So you can decide whether you want to be left on life support, if you're brain dead or so on, and you can go ahead and make those decisions in that document. There's also a statement of intent to return, and what that does, it makes your primary residence exempt from the Medicaid or Medi-Cal spend down to help you qualify for state assistance. So these documents are your fundamental basic documents. But the big difference when we take a look at these two trusts is what is missing. Well, when we take a look at this trust in the very back, you'll see all these red sections, right, which include comprehensive transfer documents, personal property transfer documents, deeds to real property, changing your assets to the trust. All these instructions will help you, in addition to the person that comes out to assist you in finalizing your trust, will have expertise in that funding process. So, getting a little bit further, what is the difference between these two? Well, or most trust is that it's that assistance with funding. Again, do you really want to save $300 or $400 or possibly nothing just to realize that when you passed away, everything goes through probate anyway? So ideally, you want to have somebody who can help you in that funding process. Most companies on the internet don't fund your real estate for that, excuse me, for that $495 price. You have to pay extra for that deed. That deed is $150 more. Now, this particular trust, for the base price, they include 2 California deeds. So, in addition to funding all of your assets and making sure they're done properly, executing all the documents, the notary is included, and 2 California properties funded into your trust, right? You also have a hotline to be able to call the attorney to find out if you're having any issues with certain things, and you know, you're at the bank and you need to talk to someone about how to fund that asset properly. So there's a lot more service and support than what you'll get just trying to get something cheaply through the internet. So in the end, you have to ask yourself this question: do I really want to save $100, $500, but have it still not done correctly? Many of us have been through that. We hired a mechanic that saved us $500 only to find out they did work wrong, and you end up having to go to a better mechanic and spend $2,000 or $3,000 just to fix it. So that being said, the law firm that underwrites this trust has been in business since 1980. That's 34 years. They have executed well over 100,000 trusts, so they obviously know what they're doing. I myself, as a registered investment advisor, have been managing assets for 26 years, so there's not a single asset that I haven't seen, whether it be a foreign asset or whether it be mineral rights or everything. I know all these assets. I know how to fund them properly. So these are all things that you'd be able to get when you execute your trust. I know that it will be done properly, provided that you gave us all the accurate information and everything's created. We will help you make sure your estate plan is complete when we're done. So you can save a little bit of money. Maybe it'll be done right, maybe it won't, or you can pay a little bit more money and make sure it's done. Now, this is not a $30,000 trust. It's also not a $500 trust. All those things that I explained to you, the notary, funding instructions, assistance with funding, all the extra documents that you would pay extra for with the bargain trust that in the end will end up costing you $1,500 to $1,800 to have it done correctly. All that is included with this trust for under $1,000. So all you need to do is give me a call at 800-584-1902 and set up a free 1-hour consultation, and I'll be happy to discuss your individual estate plan. Thank you for joining me, and have a great day.